A major turning point emerged in the trial of a jealous husband accused of murder after police discovered the defendant's truck, which had been involved in a deadly crash. This development could play a critical role in unraveling the case, which has already captured the public's attention due to its dramatic nature. The accused, a man driven by intense jealousy, stands accused of killing a man he believed was involved with his wife. The discovery of the truck, a key piece of evidence, adds a significant layer to the ongoing investigation, bringing with it new revelations that could potentially seal the defendant's fate. The trial has unfolded like a gripping crime drama. It all started with an alleged love triangle between the defendant, his wife, and the victim. According to court documents, the defendant believed that the victim, who was a co-worker of his wife, had developed an inappropriate relationship with her. This belief, fueled by jealousy, reportedly pushed the defendant over the edge, leading him to plot what authorities are now calling a premeditated murder. In the lead-up to the fatal incident, witnesses have testified about the defendant's increasingly erratic behavior. Several close friends and family members spoke of how his jealousy escalated over time, creating a hostile environment that eventually culminated in the deadly crash. Phone records, text messages, and social media interactions revealed that the defendant had been obsessively monitoring his wife's communications. This digital trail further demonstrated his growing paranoia, providing prosecutors with a mountain of evidence pointing to his possible motive for the crime. On the night of the crash, witnesses claimed to have seen the defendant's truck following the victim's car closely before both vehicles veered off the road. The crash resulted in the victim's death, but the defendant's truck was nowhere to be found until police finally located it days later. The recovery of the vehicle has raised new questions about whether the crash was truly an accident or a deliberate act of violence. When police located the defendant's truck, they discovered significant damage consistent with the crash's timeline. Investigators believe the defendant abandoned the vehicle in an attempt to cover his tracks, further supporting the prosecution's case of premeditated murder. Forensic experts are currently examining the truck for any additional evidence that could link the defendant to the victim's death. If conclusive evidence is found, it could serve as a critical blow to the defense's argument that the crash was an accident, not a calculated move. The defense, on the other hand, has maintained that the crash was a tragic accident, emphasizing that there was no intent to kill. They argue that the defendant was in an emotional state, but did not plan the fatal crash. They are expected to challenge the evidence provided by the prosecution, especially the narrative surrounding the truck's disappearance and subsequent discovery. According to the defense team, the defendant panicked after the crash and fled the scene in a state of shock, not out of a desire to evade justice. As the trial progresses, the court will have to consider whether the defendant's actions were those of a man driven by overwhelming emotion or someone who coldly plotted murder. The discovery of the truck complicates the case, but it also opens up new possibilities for both the defense and the prosecution to argue their sides. The jury will likely be asked to weigh the significance of the evidence, particularly how the truck's recovery factors into the larger narrative of guilt or innocence. In addition to the truck, prosecutors have presented further evidence that points to the defendant's potential guilt. Security footage from nearby cameras captured the moments leading up to the crash. The footage reportedly shows the defendant's truck speeding behind the victim's car before both vehicles disappear from the frame, heading towards the scene of the crash. Prosecutors argue that this footage is consistent with their theory that the defendant was tailing the victim and intentionally caused the fatal collision. Furthermore, expert testimony has provided additional insights into the dynamics of the crash. Forensic crash analysts have testified that the damage to both vehicles indicates a high-speed collision, which aligns with the prosecution's theory of deliberate intent. The expert witnesses have also highlighted that the positioning of the vehicles post-crash suggests the defendant's truck struck the victim's car at an angle consistent with a premeditated attack. However, the defense is not without its own counter-arguments. They have brought forward their own expert witnesses who challenged the forensic evidence presented by the prosecution. According to the defense's experts, the crash could have been the result of reckless driving on both sides, not a targeted murder attempt. They also pointed out that the defendant was emotionally distraught at the time, which could have affected his judgment, but does not prove premeditated intent. As the trial continues, the jury will also hear from several key witnesses. Among them are the victim's family members, who have provided emotional testimony about the impact of the loss on their lives. The victim's mother broke down in court as she recounted her last conversation with her son just hours before the crash. The emotional weight of this testimony is likely to influence the jury as they consider the broader human toll of the case. On the other hand, the defendant's family has also testified, describing him as a loving husband and father who became consumed by jealousy. His wife, who is at the center of the alleged love triangle, took the stand in a tense courtroom moment. She denied having an affair with the victim and expressed regret over the entire situation, blaming herself for not recognizing the signs of her husband's unraveling mental state. Her testimony provided a rare glimpse into the personal dynamics that led to the fatal crash and has sparked further debate about whether her relationship with the victim was innocent or inappropriate. The trial has also sparked discussions about the nature of jealousy and its potential to drive individuals to commit acts of violence. Psychologists who have followed the case have noted that extreme jealousy can lead to impulsive, irrational decisions, which might explain the defendant's behavior on the night of the crash. While the legal question at hand is whether the defendant's actions were premeditated, the underlying psychological aspects of the case cannot be ignored. The case serves as a tragic reminder of how unchecked emotions can lead to devastating consequences. As closing arguments approach, both sides are expected to focus heavily on the evidence surrounding the crash and the defendant's truck. The prosecution will likely emphasize the circumstantial evidence pointing to premeditation, while the defense will continue to argue that the crash was a tragic, unintended consequence of the defendant's emotional state. The jury faces a difficult decision, one that will hinge on how they interpret the discovery of the truck and its role in the deadly crash. In the aftermath of the trial, regardless of the verdict, the case will likely leave a lasting impact on those involved. For the victim's family, justice will mean holding the defendant accountable for their loss. For the defendant and his family, the outcome will determine whether he spends the rest of his life in prison or is given a chance at redemption. And for the public, the trial serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of jealousy and the tragic consequences that can arise from unchecked emotions. The discovery of the defendant's truck after the deadly crash adds a dramatic twist to an already complex and emotionally charged murder trial. Whether this key piece of evidence will sway the jury remains to be seen, but its significance cannot be overstated. As the case nears its conclusion, all eyes are on the courtroom, waiting to see if the truck's recovery will be the final piece that brings justice to the victim's family, or if the defense can successfully argue for the defendant's innocence. The outcome of this trial will not only determine the defendant's fate, but also send a powerful message about the consequences of jealousy, rage, and violence.